Open water swimming is as much a mental challenge as it is a physical one. Yet, for many swimmers, the psychological side of preparation is still the most underestimated. In long swims, we're asked to deal with uncertainty, discomfort, fatigue, and moments where things don't go to plan, often for hours at a time, with no lane ropes and no easy reset. Today's guest is Nathaniel Wells, a psychologist with a background in endurance sport and performance psychology. I first worked with Nat when he was an undergrad student at UWA, where he completed a solo Rottnest swim, RCS 2065, and an Ironman. And since then, he's gone on to complete his Masters of Psychology and work with athletes across a range of sports, from swimming and soccer to dance and esports. Nat brings a unique perspective that bridges performance and well-being. In this conversation, we explore the mental demands of long open water swims, how swimmers can work with discomfort rather than fight it, the role of mindfulness and acceptance during long efforts, and how to look after your mental health before and after big events. If you're training for a long swim, or if you've ever found yourself physically prepared but mentally stretched, this episode is for you. Nat, really excited to have you on today and to talk about the psychological side of open water swimming. But before we start, I'd really like if you could just share your background in swimming, in that endurance world, and maybe where you got to and maybe what you'd like to still achieve.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been around the pool since as early as I can remember. My parents threw me in pretty much as soon as they could into swimming lessons, and it became pretty apparent early that I had somewhat of an aptitude for doing laps and wanting to do more and more and more. Kind of in my early 20s, I think it would have been third year of uni. My friend was in the rugby club, and it was open day at UWA, and he said, "Oh, the swim club's right next door to us. You should go talk to them," because I've been talking about getting back in the pool for, I don't know, a couple of years and never really actioned anything. And I walked over to the student swim squad, and they told me we swim on Monday morning at 7:30. We'll see you there. And I went, didn't miss a single session for the entire semester, even though I cramped up every session for pretty much the first month. And then they stopped swimming over the holidays, and I was pretty bummed about that because I wanted to keep going, and the idea of swimming by myself at ballpark pool didn't really appeal to me. So they said, "Oh, you can go swim with the triathlon club," and I went, "No way am I going to go swim with them. They're so intimidating. I don't even run. Like, they swim for an hour and a half. They don't swim for an hour. That's never going to happen." But it did happen, and I hopped into the pool, and I think Phil was the first person I met, and got on like a house on fire straight away. Started swimming very consistently with you guys, and then started backing it up and doubling with the student swim squad afterwards. And as a junior, I never really performed super well because I was a very little kid, but I always gravitated towards distance. Like the 1500 was the race that I wanted to do. And I moved into open water swimming after swimming with you guys, and then did Rotto in a team, and then decided I'll do it solo. And you paddled for me for the first half, and that was amazing. And did Ironman that same year, and yeah, really caught the bug after that. So the swimming career is very much peaked at Rotto and declined since, in that I've started full-time work as a psychologist, and there's very little time for things like that once you're settling into that kind of career. But I'd always wanted to get back and do Rotto again, and do some other big swims. So we'll see with the athletic goals, but it's just good to be in the pool pretty much.
So you've gone from this endurance swimmer to psychologist. When you look
Mm.
back now, what stands out about the mental side of swimming and maybe from a Rottnest swimming perspective?
Oh, what stands out is that it's really bloody hard in a way that you never really prepared for, in that you can do sets upon sets in the pool, and you can think that you're in good shape and in good nick. But then when you're out there, when rubber meets road, and you're in the water, you're out there in the channel, and you kind of go, okay, holy shit, I'm really prepared for this on a mental level. That's something I never really fathomed, I think, even though I was studying psychology at the time that I did the swim. you can never really appreciate how important the preparation is mentally, whether it be imagery of how it's going to go on the day or pre-performance routines, all that kind of stuff, staying present in a race, accepting adversity, because good God, adversity comes in open water swimming every single time without fail. There's so much prep that you can do from a mental side, but it's never really encouraged, never really spoken about. It's all physical preparation. It's all getting the reps in, getting your volume done, getting some gym work if you're doing that. But nobody ever really talks about the mental side.
So you mentioned you were studying it at the time.
Mm.
If you reflect now, were there any techniques you were actually trying to utilize at that point? And potentially there's something that you'd use different now, but at that point in time, with your limited knowledge, what were some of the tools you were trying to engage?
Yeah, some of the ones I was engaging or trying to engage, I later learned through my sports psychology masters that they were actually techniques that we can teach to athletes that are really helpful for optimizing performance. But at the time, I just thought, these are things that work for me. Like one of the big ones for me that I find works really well is using imagery. So imagining how race day is going to go from the start to the finish and imagining each different kind of challenge that can come up as things go along. And pre-performance routines were a big one as well, like always doing the same sorts of things before a race or before training. I think of the drills that we used to do before, Lake Munger or McGilvray intervals on Mondays and Wednesdays running though. And I still do all those drills now, maybe 25% from a physical side, but more 75% because they get me in the right mental headspace because it's what I always do. And with swimming, with Rotto, I was doing the same stretches, I was doing arm swings, I was doing all the same stuff that I always do, which operationally in a sports psychology perspective, that stuff helps so much because it mentally scaffolds you to perform from that point.
Yeah, and you mentioned that we do this physical preparation
Mm,
and we get ourselves super fit for an endurance event like a 20K swim, but little time is invested in that psychological preparation.
mm.
Could you sort of expand on opportunities where athletes could develop those skills?
Yeah, of course. One of my favorite places to start with an athlete who comes in, endurance athlete or otherwise, is looking at how you reflect on your performances, how you jot down, mentally reflect, write about, journal, all of those kinds of things about each performance that you go through, sometimes even every training session. So when you go through a race, let's say you're doing the open water swim series in the build up to Rotto, and you've had a 5K on the weekend, you've just swum at Coogee, you've gotten stung in the face by jellyfish 10,000 times before you've gotten out the water. How are you reflecting on that performance? What are you actually taking away from that performance is a really good place to start with some mental prep for a race to come. Say you've got an A race coming up, which is Rotto, for example, we'd try to look back on those kinds of performances and say, what did I do well in that race for starters? Because we're all pretty hypercritical as athletes. We all know what we did poorly at the end of the race, but start with what you did well, because that's what you can carry forward to the next race. Then what could you have done better? Because that phrases things differently in your mind as to not what I did poorly, but what could actually be better about that. And then how can I improve that in the next race? Or how can I improve that when I go into my A race next? So starting with some reflection is definitely helpful. And then looking at what kind of skills are you practicing whilst you're training and racing? So what's your self-talk like? How do you talk to yourself in the race? Do you talk to yourself in the race? Do you talk to yourself in training? How are you practicing being present throughout your training and your racing as well? Are you dissociating out and thinking of other things, or are you thinking about what comes next? Are you dreading what comes next? Like having a look at what's actually going through your mind throughout racing and training. And then looking at how we can replicate what we want on race day in training, not just from a physical perspective, but from the mental side as well. Like, where would you want your mind to be when you're racing, and how can you do that in training too?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there, and hopefully we can sort of unpack some of that as we go through.
That was a big info dump. Yeah.
But I think it's really important that we acknowledge those things. Why, though, do you think we typically invest so much more time in that physical prep and maybe the athlete doesn't spend the time on that psychological side?
Because it's not seen. You know, you look at someone on Instagram or you look at someone's Strava, you don't see all of that prep. That's done in times that aren't recorded, that aren't glamorous. So yeah, it's not often spoken about, and it's very private and very vulnerable too. And that's often why a lot of people don't want to speak about it, especially if you've got a lot of negative self-talk or a lot of worries about how the race is going to go or those kinds of things. Like verbalizing all of that even to yourself can be really hard.
Yeah. So if we just look at the swim itself
Mm.
and in a longer swim, we get uncomfortable. It's
Mm-hmm.
inevitable.
Yep.
So we can't eliminate it.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do to try and embrace it and then make it a bit easier to get through the challenges that you need to face over such a long period of time?
Yeah, I think for starters, you need to get rid of that myth in your head that it's going to be easy the whole time if you train hard enough. I mean, the higher performance you get, the more uncomfortable it gets. But people seem to believe that, you know, if you're an even better athlete, then it's just going to be easier for you. But the fact of the matter is, it is just discomfort the whole way through, which makes it seem even more insane that we choose to do these things. But it is important to change your relationship with that discomfort, as you said. Learning to lean into it, be present with it rather than dissociating from it can be really helpful. And that often comes in the form of mindfulness strategies and acceptance strategies primarily, which I can elaborate on if you'd like.
Yes, certainly.
Sure. So, mindfulness at its core, from a sports psychology perspective, is a skill to make you more present when you are uncomfortable, when you are going into adversity, when you are worried, when the prep gets really hard or motivation dips. It enables you to show up and still be in the present moment when those things happen. So, mindfulness, yeah, it is headspace app stuff and sitting and focusing on your breathing and trying to stay in the moment. But you can actually apply that to training and to race day. For example, you build up an acumen of skills when you're sitting there focusing on your breathing for an extended period of time. And that's really boring, but that's for a purpose. You're tolerating discomfort by doing that. And you're learning to just keep coming back to one thing, to one thing, to one thing, to one thing. So that when you go and do, say, a 1K time trial in a long course pool, that's 15 minutes ish, depending on how fast you are. Say you swim 130s, that's 15 minutes of discomfort. And your mind may wander thousands of times during that 15 minutes. But if you've practiced mindfulness really well, you can keep bringing your attention back to what you want to focus on, what's useful to focus on for you, which might be your stroke rate, which might be your breathing, which might be your catch. It could be anything. And if you've got that mental skill to keep coming back to something that's in the moment, that's in your control, that's useful to keep your attention on, you're not going to get lost in all of the other stuff. And then you can imagine that that extends really well into a 5 hour race, a 6 hour, 7 hour Rottnest Channel swim, where you need to pay attention to your pull, your temperature, when the next feed stop is, all of those kinds of things. But if your attention's wandering off to negative things that aren't in your control, like, man, these conditions suck. What if there's a shark underneath me? Are there jellyfish coming up again? Like, just being able to notice that and come back to the present moment is a really, really valuable skill to practice when you're actually performing. So mindfulness isn't just relaxing and doing headspace meditations. It's application in the sport too. So I teach athletes a lot of the time when they come to me for sports psychology work to do mindfulness really well and to use it in their sessions plus in their races. And then on top of that, you've got acceptance as well. And acceptance means meeting reality on reality's terms. So when you show up for an open water swim and the conditions are shit and the swell is massive, you're going to have to meet that on its terms, not your own. even if you've done all of the prep for really flat, beautiful conditions, you have to be able to accept what's in front of you. And mindfulness can actually help you do that. Where if you notice a lot of thinking around, God, I wish these conditions were better. I wish this day was better. You're already in an idealized scenario. You're not actually in the moment with what you need to do today. So if you can notice that, come back and say, you know what, this is what I'm dealing with today, and that's what I'm going to see what I can do with, then that actually helps you perform at a much higher level.
Yeah, we could talk for hours on this sort of stuff.
Yep.
But you did mention jellyfish a few times already today. Is there some history there with your interaction with jellyfish in the open water?
Oh man, there's so much history. Back when I was getting into open water swimming, one of my biggest fears was getting stung by jellyfish because it just like never happened to me. So I turned it into this massive story in my head of what a jellyfish sting would feel like. And it was so irrational. And I use a key word in there that I turned it into a bit of a story because a lot of my clients, athletes, we all do this. We turn these fears into big stories in our heads that we get really fixed on. And I was shit scared of jellyfish. And funnily enough, that example that I used with an open water swim at Coogee, I showed up there with James Baker and like pods and pods of jellyfish had washed into the course overnight. And the way I looked at the end of that race, I looked like I was sunburnt all over my body because I've been stung so many times. And then when we did the Rottnest swim, I remember sticking my head up at the first feeding stop and saying, Grant, I've been stung on my face by a jellyfish. And you go, yeah, that's good. That'll keep you awake. Got a long colored history with stingers.
um, so coming back to self-talk,
Mm.
how can swimmers recognize self-talk and potentially the unhelpful side of it without trying to force being positive all the time?
That is a really good question because being positive all the time isn't the answer at all. There's definitely going to be negative moments where if you force yourself to be positive, you're just not really meeting what reality is. So being aware of your self-talk is a really good place to start, in that most swimmers won't really be as aware of what's going on in their minds as most. You're not necessarily thinking from a meta perspective of your own thoughts, going, what am I thinking in my head right now as you're in the middle of a 400 time trial? You know, you're just trying to survive at that point. But if you can ask yourself questions when you're at training, when you're in, I don't know, a training race, asking yourself the question, what is going through my mind right now and how am I talking to myself? And with the performance reflection stuff, you can add this and supplement it for some assistance by writing down what was mostly going through your head at the time and what the tone was in terms of talking to yourself. Sometimes people are incredibly positive and they're saying nice things to themselves, like, you can do it, you can get through this. Sometimes people are getting really negative and down on themselves, like, you suck, this isn't how you trained, you can do so much better than this. But then on the other end, you get some people who benefit from the negative stuff too, like it pushes them harder. So there's no one size fits all sort of type of self-talk that encourages people to do better. But there is one that I find really fits a lot of athletes to assist things and make things a bit more optimized. And that's a bit of distance self-talk. So you talk about yourself in the third person and you go, Nathaniel can do this. Nathaniel's doing really well today. Like, it sounds really cringe to say out loud, and I'm not loving saying it out loud about myself, but if you talk to yourself in the third person and give yourself some affirmations in that way, it can often help things. But you got to start with some awareness and finding what works for you, not just what you do all the time, but what you think will help you.
You mentioned motivation. So some days we're out in the middle of the ocean, the conditions change, become worse, speed drops off. What are some of the things we should be thinking about then? Do we try and maintain a high level of motivation? Are we expecting it to stay there? Do we expect it to vary through the swim? Should we be resetting our goals at that time? What should happen when things don't go to plan?
Well, when things don't go to plan like that, it comes a little bit back to what I was saying before around meeting reality on reality's terms. your own motivation and feeling on a day like that is going to vary dramatically. You can't expect yourself to remain completely still and consistent in the same way that you might expect the water to. It changes. And you might feel really motivated halfway through that swim when you really didn't on the shore. And that's okay. Like a lot of these things come back to just validating your own experience. If you're standing there and you're going, I feel like shit and I don't want to be here, that's okay. You're allowed to feel that, and giving yourself permission to feel that is really helpful, because motivation it's a really fickle feeling. Yeah, lots of clients coming in asking to feel more motivated, working on feeling more motivated, but there's nothing really that can force that out of you. Motivation, when you get to the core of it, is just having a reason to do something. The motivational why, the why you would go to do that swim, that's what's important. The motivational feeling is much less important. So having a really strong why for why you would show up to training in the morning, why you would show up to that race that you are now not particularly happy to be doing, why you would try to get through it, that is what you can rely on a lot. And then if your feelings aren't there, you can validate that they're not. You can be okay with that. And then if they come back, that's awesome. That's a great side effect. But relying heavy on the logical why for why you're there, why you do what you do, that is something that you can always consistently count on.
That's one of the first questions I ask swimmers when they decide that they would like to swim to Rotto is why, because
Mm.
that then gives me the ability to talk to them about when things are becoming challenging through training, etc. As to, this is what you said, this is why I want to do it. Let's revisit that. But I'd always suggest too that the number plates aren't usually the best why, considering your RCS 2065.
Exactly. And I didn't get to keep those either. I moved to Queensland. I had to give them back to the WA state government. So that's not a good why. You don't get to keep those if you move into state.
So just talking about this motivation and reframing things. Look, when I get guests on, I ask them what their favorite set is, swimming set. For you, because obviously we're looking about challenges, etc. I'm sort of interested to know what maybe your least favorite set was. I've got a bit of an idea of what it might be, but I'd like you to maybe share potentially what your favorite swim set was, and also one that wasn't.
Yes, I've been talking about this set since I left Perth, and I probably will talk about it until the day I die. The set that I hate the most, but I know it's beneficial, is golf. 21's best average on two. It's a 40-minute set. You just know how you're going to feel. And it is just the tolerance of discomfort set, because it is just discomfort throughout. And you're trying so hard to hit your pass score, and it's just tough. And I look at it and I go, I know I need to do this. This is a good set. And I've done it other times because I know it's good. It's really good for fitness, but good God, it's hard. And staying present during a set like that is really hard, because you know how much is left to go throughout. But it's a really good exercise to practice. Just focus on the next 100. Just keep focusing on the next 100, the next 100, and making the time that you need to make. And the rest will happen however they'll happen. That's probably my least favorite. Um, I'm pretty basic, Grant. Like, my favorite is just 10-1s. Just like aerobic 10-1s. Like, nothing beats it. Like, when you can hit it really well and comfortably. I just love a good 10-1s. Could be a whole session, 4x10-1s.
Everyone's very different, but it gives you the opportunity to see where you're at. And I think that's where, when people have a favorite set and they repeat that on a semi-regular basis, it gives them confidence as to their fitness. And as you've just indicated, there's opportunities too to try and work on that mental side, which maybe some of those swimmers don't actually recognize at the time.
Yeah. And that comes back to goal setting, knowing, what do I want to get out of this set? Do I just want to survive this set, or do I want to achieve something in it? And a set like golf, for example, if you're choosing to do something like that, as opposed to, Grant put this on the board and I need to survive, knowing what you want to get out of it is really helpful. And from a mental side, if that's, I want to practice being present, I want to be able to accept adversity, I want to be able to lean into discomfort, being able to then check yourself and did I meet that goal during that set? How come I didn't? How can I do that better next time? Like it all ties in. These are all the mental aspects that we don't necessarily concretely approach, but they're all accessible all the time. It's not like going to the gym and working lats and shoulders. You can just do this stuff incidentally when you're in the middle of a set. You don't have to make time for it.
Yeah. After a big race like swimming to Rottnest, and things don't necessarily go to plan, or that the outcome wasn't what you'd hoped, how can we then reflect on that to learn more, to progress for next time?
I always bring things back to a good, better, how. Like, what did you do well? How could you do better? Then how are you actually going to do that next time? But also giving yourself some time afterwards. Like, you don't need to rush straight into this kind of thing, to let the race sort of cement in your mind, and so you've got time to reflect on it. And not throwing yourself straight back into training can often be helpful too, in that I've definitely done a lot of that myself. Like, I have a bad marathon and I immediately just want to go straight back to intervals, then injure myself and then have forced time off, as opposed to doing it rationally and giving yourself some time to just validate, the disappointment. Like, I didn't hit what I wanted to hit, and that's okay. Like, let yourself feel bad about that. You can't force yourself to be happy with a bad race, nor should you. And let yourself feel bad. Don't drink your sorrows away if you can help it. And then take some time to reflect. Write out the race, write out how everything went step by step. Like a good little race journal, like post-race report, can always help solidify a lot of that memory as well. And then looking at what could have been good in it, what would you want to keep doing? But then what could have been better? Then how are you going to improve that next time? This is a pretty good framework to approach with.
And potentially some of these athletes really identify as a swimmer. So how do they separate that self-worth from that performance outcome?
Oh, that's the age-old question. It all comes back to identity at the end of the day with stuff like this, in that when you define yourself as something, as a swimmer, as a psychologist, as an academic, as anything, you put yourself in a box. And in that box, there's certain behaviors and things expected of you. Like, if I say I am a runner, then I'm expected to run, and run however many times a week as I associate with being a runner. But I would call myself a runner, but I'd also call myself a swimmer and a cyclist and a psychologist and a gardener sometimes. And there's got to be layers to your identity too. And when you put all your eggs in one basket, then you run huge risks with these kinds of things, that once you get a performance that you don't like, it is devastating when you don't have other things in your life to rely on. So fleshing out other aspects of your life can be so important, because if all your eggs are in the basket of swimming, then when swimming doesn't go well, nothing goes well. And when we talk about athletes at like the Olympic level, this is something that we really highlight a lot over a lot of things in the sports psychology space, of course, because in our work, this is called identity foreclosure. You foreclose your identity fully into one thing. And then when you get athletes transitioning out of their sport, they got no idea who they are. And that can be really distressing for people. So fleshing out other aspects of your life, focusing on other things is really, really helpful. But if you engage in other things, you spend time with some other friends, you try a different sport one day a week, you go do some yoga, stuff like that, it helps ease the blow of these kinds of things when things aren't going well.
What you're talking about really resonates. See, from a coaching perspective, how do we embed some of these things within training to really ensure the athletes are aware of what you're trying to achieve from a mental perspective?
Yeah, definitely. And I will say as well, there's so much information out there because it's so hyper individualized. and the concepts can go so deep that there's just so much to talk about. And I'd urge that anyone who's listening and is interested in any of this stuff, Google the buzzwords and see the information that you can find. And if you're really interested in it, see if you can find a sports psych. I know there's a couple that float around Perth. There's heaps of them in Melbourne that do telehealth. I do telehealth as well. And talk these things through with a professional, because they'll be able to guide you through it in an individualized manner. Because just saying like, oh, just try positive self-talk doesn't necessarily usually work. It's got to be what works for you, what's palatable for you. And yeah, as you said, we could be talking all day about this stuff.
So athletes spend a lot of money on swimming to Rottnest or other big endurance-based events, Ironman, etc. So the event entry fee is large. The amount of time they invest, the cost on equipment and nutrition in the training phase, coaching, etc. But this is one area that potentially athletes don't invest anywhere near as much as they potentially could.
Yeah, well, I sometimes say to people, would that new expensive set of wheels be more beneficial than a couple of sessions with a psych to get your headspace in the right place? Because yeah, maybe you'll save 10 watts on race day, but you could be racing way faster just by getting your head in the right place instead.
And so acknowledging that there is opportunities to develop, and it takes time to develop those skills. If we're looking at an event like Rotto, what are some of the things that people could do, maybe if they only had 1 or 2 weeks before the event, just
panic training,
to give them a bit more confidence going in, or some skills that might allow them to deal with the changing nature of the race?
Yep. Besides 100 hundreds, which I'd recommend to anyone, a few things that you can try, in that last couple of weeks sort of time frame. Set up a bit of and I mean this in a really flexible way. This is not supposed to be a rigid thing. A play-by-play imagery script of how you think the race is going to go. So you've probably imagined in your head, especially if you've done the race before, what's going to happen on race day. You already know roughly everything that's going to happen on race day. But if you go by, say, morning arrival and you're warming up, you're with your paddler and you're cold and all that stuff, play by play, what's that going to feel like? And writing it down sense by sense. So what are you going to be able to see? What are you going to be able to hear? What are you going to be able to smell, taste, and touch? Get all of the vivid details in mind, get it all there, and then write down a script of what's going to happen from your perspective. Doesn't have to be completely accurate, because it never will be. Like, there's going to be people there that you didn't expect to see there. The start line might have moved slightly. Like, we're not trying to be rigid about this. And then go first, 5Ks. What's that going to feel like? What are you going to be able to see, hear, touch, taste, smell? You're going to be able to taste a hell of a lot of salt. I can tell you that right now. Then what are your Powerades going to taste like at the feeding stops and all of that stuff? Then 5K to 10K, what kind of soreness can you expect now? What came up for you before? What's come up for you in the pool when you've done 10K sets? Like, where are you going to start to be able to feel it? Write down all of the things that you're going to feel, then 10 to 15, then 15 to the end. And then write a script as well for what finishing is going to feel like. What are the things you're going to be able to see? Because, and drawing on my own experience here, one of my, I think, failures from the Rottnest swim was I wasn't present enough at the end. It felt like I just got out of the water and I ran up the ramp as fast as I could, nearly tripped over. And then I crossed the line. I went, oh, it's over. Like, I wasn't present enough in that ending period. I don't really remember much of it. And that was a bit of the disappointment. So running through what was going to happen at the end in your script as well is helpful. And once you've done that, take a step back and write a new script for what am I going to do if everything goes wrong? Just in case. We're not coming up with everything is going to go wrong, but no doubt, like, your worries and your nerves have thought about a lot of this stuff already. So let's actually turn that into action, because your anxiety and your nerves are there for a purpose. They're trying to prepare you for adversity. So let them, and turn it into an actionable plan of, what if I show up in the morning and my paddler's not there? How am I going to feel? What am I going to be able to touch, taste, sense, and smell? All that stuff. Do I have their number? I'll call them, getting all of that stuff down pat of what if everything goes wrong helps, because then you've also got the plan of what if everything goes right. And what you're going to encounter on the day is a combination of the two. So then you've got pretty much everything there, and you've given yourself a mental scaffold and a plan for what's going to happen on that day. Because what's going to happen on that day is going to be a bit out of your control, but how you've mentally prepped all of that stuff is very much in your control. And writing down some stuff of what you're going to do if those things go bad as well always helps too.
Yeah, I think that's some really simple advice for listeners to take on with a short time frame to this next big event. Obviously, there will be other events throughout the years that swimmers will do, and potentially then they can reach out and try and develop some other skills.
Oh yeah, 100%. And if you have more time, like the best one to go for is mindfulness, because when you look at meta-analytic research and all the research in sports psychology of what mental skills help athletes the most in optimizing their performance, mindfulness is a cut above everything else. There's, pre-performance routines, what I've just described as imagery, they're all helpful, but mindfulness is way, way, way more helpful in the long run. So if you've got more time, that takes a while to cultivate, because that's a mental skill like anything. It's like lifting weights in the gym. If you just went to the gym for 2 weeks, you can't really expect to be stronger. And mindfulness is a bit like that too. You need to practice that consistently over a long period of time if you expect it to work. So if you got more time, give that a crack.
Within your work, you talk about seeing the client first and the label second. We touched on that a little bit before. So can you give a bit more detail how that applies within sport?
Well, within sport, it's interesting because you get an athlete into the clinic and they're very, very like outcome driven. They go, I'm here to lift heavier or get past this mental barricade. And I go, cool. What are your hobbies? And they look at you like you got 3 heads. Like, no, that's not what I'm here to talk about. And when I put that kind of thing in my bio on the clinic website, that's more about like seeing people who are labeled as anxious, depressed, schizophrenic, all those kinds of things. There's that, but then there's also the person underneath all of that. And that applies as well if you're a swimmer, if you're a runner, if you're a cyclist, if you're a dancer, if you're a soccer player. There is a person underneath all of that labeling. And seeing that person for all the unique sort of stuff around them is really important when I see someone in the clinic. And it's really helpful to reflect on that yourself as an athlete too. Like, what am I beyond being this? And if you can't answer that question, then I suggest you take a step back from your sport until you can, because you're going to run into some serious issues down the line if you can't answer all of those questions. And if it's really distressing to you to answer that question, I'd really suggest seeking some help.
Now, if you were going to coach yourself as a younger swimmer.
Oh, good question.
So reflecting back 10, 15 years or thereabouts.
Yeah.
What sort of psychological skills would you prioritize early?
Oh, all of the ones that would deal with anxiety. I had massive pre-race worries, nerves, all of those kinds of things, and a huge, huge comparison problem. I'd compare to other athletes all the time. I would get very, very anxious, especially like in my body, like standing at a race start line, I'd be getting cotton mouth, dry mouth, and my heart rate would already be going ballistic, and I'd be sweating and shaking sometimes. And the skills that I needed at that time were a lot of just internal validation. It's okay to feel that way. And it's okay to label that. And it's okay to feel nervous, and just get present and focus on the things that you enjoy about the sport, because the outcome is irrelevant. Like, my why for being there was because I enjoy it, but I was losing that why in the comparative points and the outcome focus and all of that stuff. And that was something that I think I did really well at Rotto. I focused on the process, and I was there to have fun and enjoy it and see what I could do. And that was something I was really proud of. And some mental skills that can help you get to that point are things like mindfulness and focusing on your why and staying focused on what's in your control, what's process based. So the things that you do rather than the things that you achieve. So I needed a lot of coaching back then on those mental aspects of what's within your control. But I don't know if I would have gotten that coaching from any of my coaches because I didn't say anything about these nerves ever. I kept it all to myself. So what I would have needed more so than anything, I think, was just someone to talk to about it, really. So that's why I always urge coaches these days to ask their athletes like how they're feeling, what's going on in their heads, what they're thinking about, and approach it from like a non-judgmental place too, because it's okay to have your head in the wrong place or to be worried about outcomes. You don't have to explain that away and just say, oh, just focus on what you can control. Your outcomes don't matter. To that person, they do. So being able to just hear that and validate it is really helpful and really important.
This is one of the whys for doing this podcast is about getting out there and sharing these experiences and acknowledging that a lot of swimmers are going through similar situations. Then we're more likely to have those conversations. I mean, it might initially just be with your peers, your teammates that you're swimming with, and then it might extend through to others if you need a greater assistance.
Yeah, definitely. And it comes back to, we're all more similar than we are different. And though it may look like on a start line, everyone's got their shit together, if you had a window into all the minds on that start line, you'd see a lot falling apart.
Look, I've really appreciated the time you've given us today to share your experiences as a swimmer and being very open and honest with those, and then given some strategies and talk through some challenges that swimmers face and how they might deal with those.
Mm.
And I know that this space is huge, but is there anything else you'd like to sort of touch on before we finish off?
Oh, that is big space. I'd love to share a piece of advice that I got from one of the coaches at UQ that really stuck with me. And I just had a bit of time off from the pool because I was getting smashed by thesis and placement, and I just didn't have time to get there in the mornings. I just needed my sleep. And I rocked up to the pool and I looked at him and I said, Sean, I'm sorry, I haven't been here for a couple of weeks. And he just looks at me and goes, mate, don't worry, the pool's not going anywhere. And it just soothed my worries completely. Like, you can take some time off, you can do what you need to do to help yourself. The pool, the water, none of them are going anywhere. Even if you take a couple of weeks off and lose some fitness, it's fine. Enjoy swimming and breathe into it and do the bits about it that you love, even if it means swimming with paddles on all the time, which is what I've turned into. It's okay. Just enjoy the process. The pool will always be there.
And finally, before we finish, where you're working and if people want to reach out.
Yeah, sure. So I practice under Nathaniel Wells, a small private clinic in Brisbane's north called North Brisbane Psychologists. I work with clients across the whole lifespan and heaps of different presenting problems. I love the sport work. It's not my main shtick so much, but I have heaps of athletes as clients and I see heaps of different people. If you ever want to reach out, I can be reached through the website. If you just Google my name and psychologist, you'll find me. Yeah, if you're ever curious about any of the topics as well, flick me an email. I'm usually pretty receptive and responsive, and I can always forward some information. So do reach out.
Excellent. Thanks again, buddy.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Grant.
If there's one thing I hope you take away from this conversation is that mental skills aren't being about tougher on yourself or pushing harder. They're about learning how to stay present, flexible, and kind to yourself when things inevitably get uncomfortable. Nat's insights remind us that long open water swims don't just test our bodies, they ask a lot of us psychologically, and that preparation deserves just as much attention. If you found this episode useful, I'd encourage you to pick up one small mental skill that resonates and start practicing it in your next few sessions. Not perfectly, just intentionally. And if you think this conversation would help someone else training for a long swim, please share the episode or leave a short review. It really does help the podcast reach swimmers who might need it. Thanks for listening to the science and art of open water swimming. I'll see you in the water.